All right. Hello, everyone. We are live, first episode of Social Ride, and we have a very special guest, George Cooper here, and he's going to be going over basically how his experience has been as a part-time driver, and we're going to go ahead and just have a great conversation about how he's enjoying the gig economy and what he sees in the future with the current services and how he has made a move to Yebi. So, George, thank you so much for having us here. And we're really excited to go ahead and start this conversation. So, thank you. So, if you can go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself. What made you get into the gig economy?
Sure. Thanks, Jamshid. Great question. So I work in tech sales here in the Bay Area, and I started in the gig economy by way of signing up with Uber back in December of 2016. I decided it was the holiday season. I had a bit of extra time on my hands, and like many other folks, just wanted to make a few extra bucks in my spare time. And coincidentally, I noticed Uber happened to have a pretty high sign-up bonus at the time. So that was kind of a compelling reason for me to sign up. And, I already owned a car and figured I could make some money after my 9 to 5 job. So everything just kind of worked out that way, and I decided to give it a try.
That's really great to hear, George. That's for me, same kind of similar situation. There was a lot of incentives when I first joined Uber. I drove for over 2 years with them, and yeah, it was really great when it first started. It was definitely leading, and I only drove for Uber. Did you drive for Lyft as well? Or was it strictly just Uber?
I'd considered at one point trying Lyft as well, given my limited time because of my day job, so to speak. Just ended up sticking with Uber.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, same here. And how many hours did you basically work when you were doing Uber, while you were actually balancing that out with just working full time? That sounds a little bit tough, but it seems like a lot of drivers are in the same kind of situation where they want to make that extra money.
Sure. At first, I kind of challenged myself to drive a little bit more than I would have liked to. Reason being, I had some targets to hit in order to get that sign up bonus. But I'd say all said and done, on average, I was driving for about 3 hours per day after work, then a bit longer for about one day on the weekends. And then, I treat myself to a day off, usually on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Why not, right? We all deserve, a day off. Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like what a lot of folks are doing. And did you work after work as well during like doing Uber, or did you do it strictly on weekends? Did you feel like was it working out for you more on the weekdays, right when you got off during the rush hour time, or was the weekends more of your scheduled timing?
It was really interesting. So, with both the sign up quotas and the requirements for the weekly bonuses, I found that a lot of it was based on number of trips. And although you think of weekends as the time to, get rich, picking up a lot of people from the bars at 2 a.m. with surge pricing, that's really not how it worked. I found that to obtain those quotas consistently, I had to do a lot of driving after work Monday through Friday during commute hours. And that way I could rack up those individual rides to hit the 25 or 50 rides a week, whatever it may be, to get that bonus.
Got it, got it. And did you have a favorite spot? Did you stay in the city? Because I know you're originally from the city, or did you do airport rides? Did you have a preference in terms of doing short rides compared to like longer rides?
Sure. So when I started out, I had the perception that longer rides would always be better, and that really wasn't the case. I really found, again, going back to those weekly bonuses that were offered, it was more lucrative to do a lot of short rides than it was to, say, drive someone from SFO all the way down to Palo Alto or something like that. So I did prefer the shorter rides in general. And then the other thing that I needed to be aware of was, how long it was going to take me to pick up the next fare. Of course, if no one's in your back seat, you're not making any money. So the ideal pickup was someone in a less dense area of San Francisco, maybe like a pickup in the Sunset, where you're only going like half a mile to pick them up, but there are no one-way streets or traffic jams or anything like that. And then driving in the city, more in the center of the city, could be good as well. But again, with traffic, it could take 10 minutes to pick someone up. And then maybe you're just taking them for a 5 or 10 minute ride. Again, that wasn't always a bad thing because I made more money off of the bonuses than the fares themselves in many weeks.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you brought that up. Last week, I went ahead and I met with a driver in San Francisco. He's been actually riding for over 6 years. And how his story was that before even Uber was in the market and this ride share was even there, he was actually rolling down his window, driving his town car, and he would flag down people, whoever was waiting for a taxi cab, and he'd be like, "Hey, where are you trying to go to? I can take you to, I don't know, to the pier for X amount of dollars." And one thing that he brought up to me is that with this bonus that you're talking about, the biggest issue that he saw was that in order to hit those bonuses, taking longer trips was difficult. However, as he took more shorter trips and tried meeting that, let's say, 100 trip limit where he can get that bonus of $500, Uber specifically was taking around 40 to 46% of the cut. So basically, he wasn't even making the full $500 or $600. Is that something that you experienced as well, where you had some complaints or had some issues with?
Absolutely. And the first thing that comes to mind, Uber's lack of transparency is absolutely awful. They should be ashamed of themselves. And that's one thing that I really like about the Yibby concept, giving drivers and passengers like that full transparency so that way they can make informed decisions. First of all, going back to all those one-way streets and traffic jams to pick up passengers in San Francisco, I mean, if it's going to take you 10 minutes to pick someone up, isn't it only fair that the driver knows how far that passenger is going to be riding, how much they stand to make off of that fare, what percentage the platform's going to take before it hits their bank account? Those are all fair questions that drivers and passengers should be aware of before agreeing to any ride. Another thing is that I think that Uber is very deceptive in how they market themselves as, a friendly player in the gig economy, empowering people like myself to make extra money after work on their own terms, set your own hours, become an entrepreneur, almost run your own business. That could not be further from the case. In reality, Uber deceives drivers. I found that sometimes when you hit when there's a weekly bonus that's being offered, say do 100 rides this week or whatever it may be. Coincidentally, I found as a driver that I would only be given longer fares. In other words, making me climb up a mountain to get to that bonus. And at the same time, if you're making more money off of the bonuses than the fares themselves, do you really have a choice but to drive more? Is that giving you freedom? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you brought up. As I mentioned, I really did enjoy that Uber experience, but slowly I realized that it did catch up to me as I was taking rides myself. I realized that I wasn't hitting those bonuses that I wanted, and it was getting more difficult. And then what happened was, I had to choose between a longer ride and a shorter ride in terms of making money. And I was canceling rides, actually, and I hate to say that. So all the riders that are listening right now, I'm totally sorry, but that's the predicament that you're in. So there's this back and forth kind of thing where the drivers are trying to hit that bonus. They're forced to do it because they need to make that money, because otherwise, if they just take regular rides, they're not making ends meet. So they have to, be strategic, and that impacts the driver, the rider experience. And I know you're a rider as well. Have you gotten that kind of an impact before, where you're on the other side of the seat?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I've been riding both Uber and Lyft very frequently to get to work. And yeah, I found the same thing. As time has gone on over the years, I'm noticing more and more frequent cancellations. And I think you're exactly right. The point you just hit on is definitely contributing to that.
Yeah, yeah, and I've had a lot of conversations with drivers and also riders as well. And the one thing is that you brought up is having that transparency in terms of knowing where the drop-off location is, knowing upfront what are the price for that. And I think that's really important. And that's something that I'm always curious about, why they're not implementing. But that's one thing that I believe, that there has to be that change. And I don't think we're gonna see it with Uber and Lyft, but we're hoping to we will bring that kind of change with Yebi. And going off of that point about some of the issues and pain points, I would like to just bring up some of the things here in terms of what drivers are facing. I'm going to show you a few things here, and then let me know what you think. So these are conversations that we have had with drivers and riders. So let me go ahead and pull this up real quick. All right, one moment here. Okay. So anyways, so I see here there's a lot of people online. Do you guys have, what are you guys' thoughts and with the comments? Do you guys have any questions for George here while I go ahead and get this pulled up here? All right. I think go ahead and pull this up. And George, are you currently driving right now, have you taken a break, or are you going? One thing that I'm curious about. So as I was driving for Uber, I never really did it. Let's say went back and forth with Uber and Lyft. Are you doing other gig economies as well? Have you tried that out?
Currently, I am not. I think see the what I experienced is that with Uber, for the reasons I previously mentioned, you've either got to be all in or all out. You're not going to make any money doing 5 rides a week. It's going to be a waste of your time, gas, and whatnot. Really, the way to do it, if you're going to do it, is you got to just concede to the game, if you will, and make sure that you hit those weekly bonuses. And right now, I just don't have the time or willingness to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree here. And going back to it now that I finally have this up, as you can see here, these are basically some of the conversations that we have had with with drivers. And one of the folks, I'm going to go ahead and read it off to you here. He was, of course, he's in San Francisco. He's a part-time driver just like you. So this is what he basically told us when we asked him what are his pain points, just like you did. So he said that, so in just the last week alone, I've been assigned 3 riders who I distinctively remember giving a 1-star rating on previous trips. What the F, Uber? Had to message Uber not to match me with these losers again. Guess Uber has done away with preventing a future match with a 1-star rating. So this really resonated with us in terms of the driver experience. I've like we touched on it. Uber really wants to get trips, scheduled and not caring about previous experiences. I know for me, I've had as a driver, riders who came in who were drunk, belligerent, and next thing I know, I had the same driver, the same rider in the car. And I guess my point is that have you had any kind of experience with this 1-star rating where you gave a rider and basically you saw the same rider again a week after that? Have you had anything like that?
That is absolutely ridiculous, but I'm not all that surprised. I had not that specific issue, but I had other issues. For example, at SFO on multiple occasions, it would have me wait in the waiting lot, and then it would tell me to go to the terminal to pick someone up. By the time I got to the terminal, that fare did not exist, and it told me go back, wait again, and that happened on multiple occasions. Reached out to Uber, and that was just one problem that I reached out to them about. They could not care less. Obviously, it was a copy and paste, canned robotic response. I don't even know if a human read it. Uber does not care about their riders or their passengers. They just care about maximizing trips and making as much money through their platform as possible.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that happens. You want to have that driver experience. It seems like a lot of the focus is on the rider, but there could be that balance. There could be that meeting in the middle and basically improving both the trips. And that's why there's that disconnect where there's if you go online in your search, there's that rider versus the driver. And I think that's never gonna work out. It's not gonna last. Definitely not.
Yeah, and in any company, it's obvious that happy employees make happy customers. And I know that gig economy workers are not dubbed as employees. Obviously, they're independent contractors, but the same concept should apply. If you have happy people providing the service, you're going to have happy long-term customers.
And that's funny. I mean, I've had conversations with drivers where they're like, yeah, I'm a contractor, but then again, it's like you're human too. You're taking these rides, and it doesn't mean that you're belittled or like when you are in a trip and all of a sudden a rider complains and make a fake story out of it, and the next thing Uber or Lyft sends you an email telling you, can you please provide your side of things? And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're deactivated. You're just another kind of driver. That has happened to me, which is really, left a really bad taste in my mouth. Have you had anything like that where you felt that Uber or Lyft wasn't listening to you when there was some kind of a, complaint or some kind of an issue where you felt like you had every right to be heard?
Yeah, there was one issue that comes to mind where I don't know the specifics of what caused this, but basically they're saying my documentation pertaining to like my vehicle inspection and insurance were no longer valid. And that could not have been further from the case because that was like 2 months into me testing the waters as an Uber partner. So, I validated everything on my end that everything was legit. And they could not have handled it more unprofessionally. I was locked out from the platform for, a week or two. And thankfully, this was a side gig for me. But due to how they've positioned, the income potential and whatnot, people actually, have their high livelihoods tied to driving with Uber. So, that opened my eyes, like, I'm okay. I have a 9 to 5. But if this were my primary source of income, that would be absolutely awful. So, yeah, it's scary how much power Uber has and how they can literally change people's lives by not conducting their service to the highest degree of professionalism.
Yeah, it's actually, when you put it that way, I never thought of it where if it was my full-time job, what am I going to do? Uber's gone. There's only Lyft. And Lyft is slowly becoming just like another Uber, with their bonuses that are not being paid in full to drivers. And of course, same kind of experience where I've heard a lot of horror stories, and I've met a lot of Lyft drivers that have had the same experience where their voices are not heard and they're deactivated. So in that case, what do you do, really? And these are folks who are driving from Central Valley all the way down here. They're sleeping in their cars for over the weekend, and it's just really heartbreaking to hear that some folks who have been deactivated on both sides just because a rider has more weight, where drivers are more dispensable in their eyes, is really dishonest, and it's not a way you want to conduct yourself as a business. Doesn't matter if you're a contractor, or your partner driver. I mean, what are your thoughts around that? I mean, you just brought it up in terms of like your full-time job. Could you imagine if it was your full-time job, and you were basically stuck with Lyft, who could potentially delete you from their app as well? I mean, it's not like really too much to really bear and think about for all those folks who have experienced it.
Yeah, it's terrible. And I think one of the worst parts about it is that very few people set out saying, I want to become a full-time Uber driver. Most people start out like me, like, I have a few extra hours a week, I need some extra income. I'm going to go ahead and try this out. But then what happens is that Uber, again, because of how they structure the earnings, they make it so that way their partners are highly, highly compelled to drive more and more. So Uber themselves makes the drivers reliant on the Uber platform to make ends meet. And then once it reaches that point, like you're saying, when something happens, it can be disastrous. And you're not an employee. I don't think there's any unemployment benefits from the state or any severance from Uber, of course. So you're on your own.
Yeah, and it's like you said yourself, you're not an employee, but why not? I mean, you're basically working for them, and you should be treated as one in terms of the service that they provide. And it's funny you brought that up. There's actually another conversation that I've had, and this is more specifically in terms of going back to the pricing. This person was from Alabo, same thing, part-time. And this is what he told me in terms of his experience with the pricing. So he said, quote, I'm livid to say the least because my passenger paid $77 and all I got was $41 for a select trip from North Beach to SFO. And I know you and we have taken a lot of those trips before from North Beach to SFO. Uber's cut is about 46% of the price charged to the rider. So one thing that I want the viewers to know is that you would really not know about this unless you're talking with the rider, seeing how much they're paying, because in your app, when you're seeing the earnings, you can't make that calculation. And what I was told by this driver was that he compared what actually the rider paid for, and once he did the calculation, he was showing me his basically his app, his profile on Uber, and he told me that they took 46%, and what Uber always says is that they take 25% and sometimes 30, but 46 is something that is crazy. That's almost half of what you're making.
That's highway robbery.
You put it in great terms. So what are your thoughts about this? I mean, is this something that you have experienced, or your friends or your other Uber driver buddies?
Yeah, that totally resonates with me. So I know as a driver, there were times when my passengers said, "Oh, wow, it's surging right now. Do you know why it's surging?" And I'd be like, "What are you talking about? I didn't see any surge. I'm just making regular money like I would at noon on a Tuesday." Like there was no surge that was apparent to me. As a passenger, I found the reverse. I'll try to make small talk with the driver. I'll be like, "Oh, good money for you right now. I saw it's surging 1.8x or whatever it may be." And they'll say the same thing that I'd said as a driver. "Wait, what are you talking about, George? I didn't notice that, but okay, that's interesting." So yeah, there's a total disconnect and lack of transparency, which needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and it's funny you brought up the surge point. There's actually really another conversation here that I want you to see. This person is from Hayward. We had a nice lunch in Redwood City, and basically he was telling me about a story of when he wanted to be strategic. And again, going to that point, drivers have to be strategic with riders. It's really dumbfounding that that has to be the case where they have to cheat the system, and then cheating the system, the riders get impacted, and then the riders, vice versa, will impact the drivers. And there's this lack of trust all around that's caused by this centralized kind of system. And this actually really, highlights that. So, quote, he said that he identified an area nearby where he thought there would be a period of high surge. So what he did is he went to that place, he went online, and nothing. He got no requests at all, and no pings. So he kept staring at his screen, he told me, to make sure he was online. He was like, what is going on? It's showing that it's 3x. And then it went back to nothing. And then it went back to another 3x, and then 2x. And then eventually he toggled it, on and off, going offline and offline and online, and nothing. And he basically told me, like, how could there be a long period of high surge yet no apparent actual ride? And I know for me, I remember late nights on a Friday when I would get out of, get off of work. I would drive specifically to where, Stanford was, the Stanford campus. I know a lot of students there were trying to go out to the city and everything. There was high surge. And as soon as I would get there, it was red. Everywhere was red. You couldn't even see the map. All of a sudden, it disappeared. As I was getting closer, you can see the border of the red line just disappearing as you're getting closer. And I thought, I was like, what is going on? I'm like, are they tracking me as I'm getting there? And it seemed like I wasn't alone. I thought I was alone at that time. But having these conversations and having a conversation with this specific driver, he definitely had the same kind of experience. Did you feel anything like that where you were like, what is going on here?
Absolutely. It is a mirage. It is a complete and utter mirage, the surge pricing. So another thing I would find is that, in the city, let's say an event was ending near Civic Center Park by Bill Graham or whatnot. So I would see the surge pricing. And oftentimes I would actually be lucky enough to get a surge fare. I think my record was a 9x surge. So I would be absolutely stoked. But with surge in the city comes traffic. So it would take me, a good 15 minutes to get there. Of course, by the time I'm 2 minutes away, on multiple occasions, the rider would cancel for whatever reason. Maybe they realized their friend was on the app as well, and they noticed that the surge was ending. For whatever reason, they would cancel. And what that meant is that I had driven, say, 13 minutes into traffic in the middle of the city to pick up this rider that is now canceled on me. And I don't get that 9x fare anymore. I get a $5 cancellation fee if I'm lucky. And then the next fare that comes through, of course, that's not going to be 9x anymore. So extreme deception.
Yeah, it's actually unfortunate. You going back to it again, you don't have to be strategic to make money. It's like, imagine at your corporate job, you had to be strategic, move around, like you're Rambo or 007, and try to be, backstab your, let's say your customers or something like that. This is actually what is going on right now, and it's not fair. There has to be that customer experience, and as I mentioned, it's that centralized place. And going to, this is the last slide here in terms of what has been going on, but basically bring this back overview. We went over bonus, we went over surge, we went over ratings, and one thing that I want to focus on, and the Yibi team is focusing on, is solving these. So going back to your bonus point, there doesn't need to be any bonuses. We believe that every trip you make the maximum amount of money, where it's fair for you and it's fair for the rider. In that case, that's where we bring in bidding. So I'm not sure if you know about this conversation, but we actually met with an economist. He got his PhD in Amsterdam. And he was telling us that bidding is the most efficient way of coming to a price. And we truly believe in that. So when you're on a Yibi trip, you know upfront what is the location in terms of where you're picking up that person, where you're dropping them off. And you don't have to worry about hitting a bonus because you're in charge of that pricing. It's between you and the rider. So that's one thing that we're trying to solve here. Another thing that we're also solving is the surge point. So with surge, one issue, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or jump in here, but with surge, what happens is that there's that double-edged sword. When there's a surge, it's 3 times. Driver pulls it up. They say, no, I'm not trying to pay 3 times whatever it is. I'm just going to wait. And then you're waiting for, 15, 20 minutes trying to get a ride. So that's one thing that we're trying to solve here. And I just want to get your take on it because that's a lot of people, drivers, have this misconception that surge is such a great thing. But what are your thoughts around this surge? Is it beneficial? Did you see it was working for you at all?
I'm not sold on surge being an effective strategy for the ride sharing economy. I think you hit many of the key points there. And just another thing about surge is that I think that has caused the base fares, the normal fares, to be abnormally low. So you can't make fair money, midweek in the middle of the day. That should never be the case. So I believe that there must be a way through bidding or some other means to make sure that drivers are paid fairly all the time, while also making sure that riders have access to rides.
Yeah, you made a good point there that on the weekends or certain surge times, you make the most money. But what happens, if you're a full-time driver and in between that time? What happens there? You take, $4 rides where the ride is like, $20 and Uber's taking the rest of the money. That's definitely not fair. And every ride does count, and every ride should be to a reasonable price where you're making money off of that. So I'm really glad to hear that that's something that you have experienced and that you agree that surge is something that is deceptive in the way of Uber trying to make that money, that extra additional money, and bringing drivers to a certain location.
Absolutely, and I think with the surge and weekly bonus gimmicks, those are meant to drive behaviors. And if Uber is driving driver behaviors, then that means that, in my opinion, that they should be considered employees, because they're essentially telling them where to drive and when. So if you're based, that's an employer-employee relationship right there. So I am shocked that given that Uber drivers have not been classified as employees, and even when they are, then at least they'll be taken care of better.
Yeah, it's something that we're really have already implemented, and it's something that we're gonna have consistently, where you're not gonna get pings or you're not gonna get messages. Sign up. Here's X amount, and then it goes away just to grab you and catch you, and then you're dry and thirsty for the next couple of weeks.
Sure.
That's definitely something that is not going to happen.
And Jamshid, I love the bidding concept because really I think that could be so effective for removing the shackles of these weekly bonuses, really like giving drivers true freedom to drive when and where they want, so they can decide on a ride-to-ride basis whether or not it makes sense. And that's what the gig economy is supposed to be all about. So really glad that you're building that from the ground up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And this wasn't something that I came up with. This is something that sitting down with drivers like yourself, sitting down with full-time drivers, with families. These are the things, that conversations that we have had over coffee, over lunch, and finally we figured out that in order to have your own control over your rides, bidding is the way. And going back to it, before Uber and Lyft, this was how things were processed. These are how things functioned without Uber and Lyft. People were in their town cars driving around, making the good old money and enjoying their rides and enjoying their trips. Now they're, like you said, shackled. They're not employees. But then again, if they do anything wrong, they talk back, or they try to say, hey, I'm a human being, they get deleted. So it's like, what is this? Why am I being treated so bad? And it really took over what was actually working. And we want to bring that back, but make it safer, make it more streamlined, and decentralizing what is going on right now with the gig economy, with Uber and Lyft. And the main thing here that I want to get out is that we want to be fair with the riders. We want to be fair with the drivers and make it a novel experience with them. We want to bring them together. There's no strategic kind of moves. Let me take advantage of the riders. Let me take advantage of the drivers and do this. No. Take your ride, make that trip the first time, because it's going to be fair. It's going to be well worth it. It's going to be a great experience. And we're going to have a lot of great experience features where it's going to go beyond the trips, where for folks who are looking for, let's say, for example, some kind of career advancement, we're going to have things in there in the future that's going to really wow everyone. So we want to improve that experience. So, stay tuned for that.
That is great.
But I know we're nearing the end here. We want to keep these short. We want to give you strong, powerful messages from actual drivers who are making the switch, who are excited about it. We're going to have a event planned for August, and I hope, George, you attend. It's going to be in San Francisco. You're going to be meeting other drivers as well. We're inviting riders. So this is going to be, like I said, we want this to be an open platform where riders and drivers come together and discuss how we can make it better and improve things. So this is something that's going to be coming up in August. We're going to be posting the specific dates of when that will be. But I just want to say, keep a lookout on that. Go to yibiapp.com. Please sign up as a rider and driver. We can only do this with you guys, with your feedback. Another thing I want to point out is that we are meeting drivers and riders throughout the next few weeks in San Francisco. So please ping us, send us a message, let us know if that's something that interests you, and we would love to get your take on it and see what ideas you have and implement them very soon. Aside from that, like I said, keep a lookout on that event that is coming up. George, I want to thank you, and I hope you come back here for another episode with Social Ride. And I hope to see you in our event next month.
Absolutely.
In August. And thank you, Facebook Live, for having us. We're going to have another episode of this. It's going to be focused on full-time drivers. And I hope to see you guys as well. If you have missed it, no worries at all. We'll go ahead and post a follow-up of this video so you can go ahead and listen to George and I. But aside from that, I hope you guys have a safe ride, and you'll be on. Take care.